Guys, so today I wanted to go over some ceramics information. This will be a general introduction to the class as well as an overview of our first project. So some things that we're going to be covering first and foremost are the basic hand building techniques. These are some of your vocabulary words from your note cards. So hand building techniques are the techniques that you're going to utilize your hands to create. So you're not allowed to use mechanical means to create these. So pinch, coil, and slabs are your basic methods of hand building. So some methods that are not considered hand building would be throwing on the pottery wheel, for example, or slip mold casting. Those are not considered hand building. So one thing to consider in here is that everybody's aesthetic is different. So aesthetics are what you find pleasing. So that's the philosophy of all things beautiful. So just remember that that is our inherent bias or judgment that we kind of bring to the table, and that's going to make what you view as appealing different than what I view as appealing. And that's just going to bring a little bit of variety to how we critique and how we view artworks. So that's just something to kind of be cognizant of. I wanted to give you some examples of what the elements of design look like with regards to ceramics specifically, because they look different. So the elements of design are the basic art tools that artists use to create works of art. So here we have all of these from intro to 3D: line, shape, color, texture, form, value, space. But I wanted to show you what they look like with regards to 3D art, specifically ceramics. So line's going to look a lot different in ceramics class than it is in painting class. So here are some beautiful examples of what line can look like. Shape. So you have a couple different categories of shape. Geometric shapes are one that a lot of people are drawn to. People are drawn to order, but with ceramics, ceramic is very it's very organic by nature, right? It's basically, a lot of people think of it like it's dirt. So making things that are geometric can be extremely challenging. Art pieces are going to probably be a lot more organic. Think of your organs. That word organ is even inside of the word organic. So your organs are squishy, they're bendy, you move, they move, earthy. That's probably going to be more of what our pieces look like, and that is a-okay. We sometimes have to surrender that control that comes along with those geometric shapes and realize that our pieces may be a little bit more organic, and that is okay. Color. Everybody loves the idea of color and glazing, but if your pieces aren't refined, even adding those glazes aren't going to hide that you've got, dusty crusties and cracks. So you've got to really refine that surface before you can apply color. If you've got unwanted textures, that's really just going to make those colors just kind of pop out as being obviously on a surface that's undesirable. So you want to really think about intentional surfaces. So even this piece back here, as textured as it is, that's an intentional surface. It's not sporadically scratchy here and there and it was just sloppy and dented. That artist made that piece be intentionally that textured so that when they utilized the glazing, they had a very nice cohesive application of glaze on that textured surface. The other thing to think about texture is if I'm going to eat or drink out of this vessel, so a vessel is something that holds food or liquid, if I'm going to eat or drink out of this, I probably don't want a texture like this piece right here in a coffee mug. Or if you're going to make like a bowl that you're going to eat beef stew or chili out of, that would really harbor some serious bacteria. But for a sculpture, that's a pretty cool texture. All right, so texture can be really important, very thoughtful. But with things you're going to eat or drink out of, you may want to save the textures for the outside and be more intentional with the smooth texture on the inside. Wanted to incorporate a really solid sketch of some pottery pieces for your planning, because just because we're in a 3D class doesn't mean that we want to skip the planning portion. In fact, we really want to consider what this is going to look like so that we can think about our construction techniques, think about the form, how are we going to get there. Your plan can change, that's totally fine, But having a rock solid plan to kind of jump off from is going to be a good place to start, okay? You want to have some good value, try to show some depth in those sketches, and then if your design changes, that's okay. Have a good range of value like this sketch down here. Doesn't necessarily have to have color. We can think about color after it's been bisque fired, which is the first firing the piece is going to undergo. And then we can start thinking about adding some color to our sketches. I may have you add some color to your sketches just to kind of think about some glazing options. Space. So all objects occupy space. If you think of a donut, the donut would be the positive and the donut hole. The space in there would be the negative. So in here, all of your objects that you're going to be making are actual positives, and then the space inside is the negative. So the space inside is the negative. So in this sculpture right here, the negative space is inside of the body and all around it. Same thing in here, that's the negative space. And then the positive is the object itself. Whereas in drawing and painting, sometimes it can be very difficult to decide what's the positive, what's the negative, because there can be an optical illusion that takes place. Wedging. So wedging our clay is one of the most important things that we can do to ensure that your piece does not blow up. If it's going to blow up, it's generally going to do it in the first firing. Some instances of when your piece might blow up after the first firing would be if your piece does not reach the peak maturation temperature in the first firing. Okay, so what I mean by that is your piece has a temperature at which it's going to reach its maturing point. We all have a maturing point in life. I was about 23 years old when I matured. Your clay is going to mature at around, this clay gets mature at around cone 05, which is around 1915 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? So let's say the kiln misfires and it doesn't quite get there, and it only fires to about 900 degrees. It hasn't fully matured. So if we have to fire it again, there's a chance that it could blow up, all right? Wedging your clay, make sure that all the air bubbles are out of there. The other thing that can be bad other than air bubbles is moisture. So we want to get rid of all the moisture and let our pieces dry out, but we also want to wedge our clay and make sure that all the air bubbles are out, okay? So air and water, those two things are death to your clay. I'll try to make sure that I dry it out for a very long time to get rid of that moisture, but I need you guys to do me a solid and make sure that you wedge your clay up really, really, really well to make sure that you get rid of the air bubbles. And between those two things, we will hopefully have a successful semester and not have any blow-ups or breaks and any kids crying, all right? Pinch pots are probably one of those things that you made if you ever worked with clay as a little kid, and they're really easy to kind of like squeeze the clay between your thummy and your little index finger, and that's how you form it. So that's called pinching. We're going to actually skip over that and go straight to coil pots. So coiling is a little bit of a labor of love, and I put a tutorial on Google Classroom, and the lady, she actually shows you rolling coils with your whole hand. I prefer to actually only roll the coil with the palm of my hand because your lumpy dumpy fingers get in the way, and by that I mean everybody has lumpy dumpy fingers, not just you. But this part here of the palm of your hand, when I show you the demo, this is where the magic happens as far as getting a nice coil, okay? Since you have a line on top of a line, they're snake-like, rope-like coils, you might have some negative space that creeps in there and some leaks, okay? So you can do what this artist has done here and smooth the inside if you would like your piece to hold water. For coil pots, though, they don't have to be very functional, meaning it has a purpose, a use, utilitarian. It could be sculptural. This little lizard over here, he doesn't necessarily have to have a use or a function or a purpose. He could just be a cute little lizard chilling on this pot over here. We're going to do a lot of slabs. Slabs are a great way to make very large scale pieces very quickly. So I love, 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 love slabs. So we'll get into slab quite a bit. We just finished our drape molds. We actually did press pots. So the difference between these are pressing your clay into your mold versus draping your clay over your mold. So you may hear those called one or the other, but draping it versus pressing it. These are handy because you have a mold to help you capture the shape of your piece. You'll hear me mention the foot of your piece, or the footing. That's the bottom. It may literally be little cute feet, or it may just be a ring on the bottom. But that can be a way to elevate your piece, or to give it a little more interest. You could add a little coil to the bottom right there. Don't forget to score and slip, or that little bugger will fall right off. You may think it's on there, but it's really not. Glazing is not like paint, so we will talk about this, but basically glazes have oxides in them. They have to mature just like clay does, and basically glaze is related to glass. All right, so it has to melt in the kiln. It's a super cooled liquid, and then after it basically melts in the kiln, it's going to cool, and then you're left with that beautiful glossy surface. So this picture looks powdery because that is like that pulverized glass pieces, and it's got to heat up and it's got to melt. Paints, on the other hand, have pigments, which are naturally occurring elements that just give you those colors basically straight out of nature, or these days, you know, they use various different chemicals and add them into our paints to get those vibrant colors. But traditionally, they would use pigments to paint with. They don't have to go in a kiln to change the color. They are what they are. Glazing, on the other hand, this color here is red because it has iron in it. When you fire it, it could turn green. So what you see is not what you get with glaze. Paint, on the other hand, what you see is generally what you get. But we'll talk about glaze. And then here were some student examples of some drape molds and press pots after they were constructed. After they were bisque fired, we added the glaze, and then we fired them again. So these have been fired twice. We don't have a wood kiln here because wood kilns are kind of a labor of love. You can load a lot of pieces in there, but you have to like really stoke the fire. If you've ever known anybody with a wood stove at home, or anybody that had their heat at home had like a wood furnace outside the home, if you ever let that go out, you got to go out all over again and start it back up. So the wood firing, you constantly have to stoke those flames to keep them going, and they're also not safe to have inside of the school. It has to be outside, and so they're not conducive to having inside of schools. A lot of colleges and universities with pottery programs have them though, like IUS has them and U of L have them. We have an electric kiln like this one right here. Gas kilns, usually we don't have those at K-12. Usually college programs will have a gas kiln also. A lot of times you have to what's called ramp it, or turn it up manually, so that you can make sure you're getting the right amount of gas, and there's a lot of room for error in that. So the electric kilns are safe for schools because these days they have what's called a kiln sitter on the outside, and it's a programmable box that lets me just and I can hit a few buttons and I can go home and sleep at night, and I can feel confident that if there's a power outage, things are going to be safe, and that the kiln's going to do what it needs to do and not burn the place down. This kiln doesn't hold as much, but it's a lot safer for schools, so that is a plus. So what are we doing? We're going to make what I call crazy pots. So this is an opportunity to do something that's not exactly functional, where a lot of things that we're going to do in this class are functional, utilitarian. They have a use or a purpose. So how are we going to get started? Good question. You've got to decide, is it going to be all about the form and be kind of sculptural like this piece right here, this jamun pot? Or is it going to be functional and be more about having a purpose? Like a coffee mug, for example. We're going to make those later on. Those are all about function, and the aesthetic, the form kind of follows it. This piece here is more about being kind of art for art's sake. It's funky, it's decorative, and then it may have a function as well. And a lot of these jamun pots, they may have been used to house like the organs of the dead and things like that. So they had a function, but they were really truly about being very ornate and decorative, and kind of being hand in hand with that function, but being very decorative was the most striking thing about these pieces. Okay, that was more long lasting than the function was. We want to be really creative with this. We're going to stay kind of small for this because I do have some people working virtually from home. No smaller than 4 inches tall. That is not very tall at all. And I'm talking about when it's all done. Your clay is going to shrink as it dries, and it's going to shrink as it's fired. So we're going to shoot for about 5 inches tall to allow for it to shrink a little bit. And then it should be about 4¼ inches tall when we're all done, okay? No taller than 6 inches. We don't want to go too big or it's going to end up taking a lot of time and we have a lot to get into, all right? I think we can get the point of coils in about 6 inches tall. But we want to get some planning done before we just can jump right in, okay? Because these coil pots are going to take some planning. So we want to do some image collection and we want to do some sketches. So do your image collection first and then let's do our sketches, because if you did your sketches and then your images, well, you might come up with a totally different idea and then you got to go back and sketch again. Go to Pinterest. I have a Pinterest board that's amazing for coil pots, okay? Look and see, do I care more about the overall form of it? Do I want to do some swirls within it, like this piece up here? Do I want to have some negative space, like this piece down here? There's a video on my Google Classroom within the same folder about jamenware and jaman pots and kind of like what they were all about. Do you want to kind of be funky and weird and stay with that? Or do you want to kind of just stay a little bit more traditional and try to do just some basic coiling and get a little bit of variation within your coils? I want you to try to mix it up and have at least 3 different types of coils, just so you're not like, I'm just coiling and just going straight up and be done within a day, okay? We're going to make sure we score and slip anytime we add clay to clay, and I'll do a demo in class, because if you just make this little donut and stick it, make this little donut and stick it, as soon as I go to lift that, it's going to fall apart, and it's not even going to make it through one lift and get in the kiln. And if it does make it in the kiln, as soon as I go to take that thing out of the bisque firing, I bet you $1 it falls apart. You got to make sure you score and slip, okay? So I'll do a little demo to get us through. Remember, it doesn't have to be functional. This is your chance to kind of get a little bit weird. My sculptors in this class can get funky and do some extra snazzy stuff on the outside, okay? So what I want you guys to do is make sure you view this slideshow. Possibly again, go through it. If I went too fast, go to Pinterest, collect your images, do your sketches, upload your plans to our Google Classroom folder, and be ready for my riveting demonstration in class. And also we'll be finishing up our little press pots in class and taking advantage of all of our time that we have together while we are in class, okay? Come prepared with any questions. And other than that, just shoot me an email if you end up having any problems or questions between now and when I see you. Thanks, guys.